Hello, everyone. This is Professor Barry. It is good to see you again. This week we are in Chapter 7, Religious Ethics. So I want you to grab your book here you go, as we read along and pull out some really important truths. So go get your book. Let's go to Chapter 7. So this week we are talking about ethics. What is ethical? What is right or wrong? That's what we mean. And we usually see this word ethics when it comes to maybe like your health or health care, what's ethical there, or maybe in education, definitely in business. But now we're going to deal with ethics in terms of religion. What is right or wrong in terms of how they might be practicing it or following it. When considering what is ethical in a religious standpoint, as we're going to analyze some things today, you have to consider three main elements. So you want to look at the facts of the case, so what happened, the person's worldview, how do they see things, and then three, look at the moral values that the person has. Okay, so remember that there are three elements when we do like an ethical or religious ethical analysis. You want to look at the facts, the worldview, and the person's moral values. Okay, so we do this every day. You may be making an ethical decision. Do I speed up, right, and go through the red light? Or do I slow down? That's an ethical decision. You may have some decisions that you're making about maybe a relationship or how you're raising your children or taking a particular job here or there. So you look at the facts, you look at how do you see the world, and then you're going to make an ethical decision about that. So I have a exercise for you. I want you to get a piece of paper. I want you to get a piece of paper and I want you to actually do this exercise. I want you to think about it. I want you to think about a really tough moral decision that you had to make this year. This year has been something else, hasn't it? Or maybe last year. Okay? Something really tough. Something that you really had to sit down and think about. I want you to write that down. And then I want you to write down three reasons why you made that decision. Did you make a decision to move? Did you make a decision in your relationship? Did you make a decision on your job? Whatever it is. Think about the three reasons why you did that. Then ask yourself, what moral values and standards are implied in these decisions? What was morally right according to you by making that decision? Let's say that you made a decision to end a relationship or something. It just wasn't going right. And then you're going to ask yourself, what were those reasons? I was feeling this way, that way, whatever. What are those three things? And then after you start to think about it, there are some moral values applied to your decision about whatever was going on with the relationship or job or whatever. Now, what I want you to think about, get your paper. Do any of those values come from the religious faith that you hold, or maybe that you were raised in, or that you know the most about? Okay? And after you write that down, what you've done in this exercise is a religious ethics activity. So you analyzed how you made a decision based on not just is it right or wrong, but was it right or wrong according to what you believe in your religious um, beliefs, or what you hold dear. All right, and so we know that in every religion, as we examine in chapter 7, every religion is not going to hold the same value on everything. Greek philosopher Aristotle argued two things, and I want you to pull these out. He argued that moral reasoning is concerned with telos and deontics, and then we're going to talk about deontological, but telos and deontics. And so he said with telos, most people when they make a moral decision are simply concerned with what's the end going to be, what's the end result, and I want my end result to be good, right? If I buy this, am I going to be broke? That's not going to be good. But if I buy this car, if I buy this house, if I move over here, is this going to put me in a better situation? That's telos. You're thinking about your ultimate end, not like end like dead, but you're thinking about your ultimate end goal. Is this going to put me in a better place? And then the second thing that Aristotle said when we make a moral decision is deontics, or deontological ethics. And that says that people, not everybody, but people make a moral decision based on some type of scripture, a holy teaching, some type of holy command, and they go back to that. And they say, wait a minute, if I buy this house, I might not be being a good steward. And in Christianity, God calls us to be good stewards and do good things with our money and not, throw our money away. Okay. But somebody else might could see it and say, well, if I buy this house over here, I'll be closer to work and my kids will be in a better school system, and maybe, there's some other good results. Okay. That's what we mean by religious ethics. So here's an example. Let's look at this. Let's say Bob is a practicing Christian who believes it's not right to steal. And where did he get that from? So he got that from the teachings of the scriptures. The 10 Commandments say don't steal. So that's where he got that from, and that was embedded in him. And so maybe his friend convinces him, oh, well, it's okay to shoplift. These are your favorite pair of shoes. These are your favorite pair of sunglasses. It's okay. They're not going to miss it or whatever. But he says, no, that's not right. It's not right according to what? According to his teachings from the Bibles or the scripture. So that's an example of deontological ethics. Ethical context. So look, when you make an ethical, moral decision, you look at the context of everything. Oh my goodness, in 2020, we've just had to endure so many things, but I want you also to see that as we make moral decisions, we have to look at the context of everything. And that's what a lot of folks are doing. They're looking at TV, they're looking at these killings and saying, wait a minute, in this context, this wasn't necessary. This was wrong. You should take care of human life and care for other people's lives. That's what we were called to do. All right, so symbols have a context. So for example, a symbol is an object, it's a person, it could be an event, and it stands for something. Symbols have stories behind them. Symbols have a narrative. So for example, I put the Confederate flag there. So like this one, this has a narrative behind it. It has a meaning behind it. So for some, they may make the decision to wave the flag or put it on their truck or something and say what they stand for. But for others, in their context, it means something totally different. And in that moral context, you're saying, well, wait a minute, in some areas that might not be acceptable, that might be hurtful to another group, that might remind them of a time in history that was not pleasant. So remember that symbols hold stories, and you want to think about the ethical context in which it came out of. All right, let's talk about a few different types of ethics. There's liberation ethics. And what liberation ethics, there's a theologian right here, awesome theologian, the late Reverend James Cone. And he's called the father of liberation. And what James Cone said is that liberation, excuse me, is that liberation is for all, but he focused more so on the black community, and he called for dismantling or tearing down white privileges to lift up and affirm black history. He called for the embrace of what's called the beloved community that Dr. King highlighted, that we take care of those in our community, that one person shouldn't have all the money and then somebody over here is homeless. Dr. Cone also called for the liberation from racism in our communities, in our government, and my goodness, we sure need that today. In Cone's liberation ethics, he also says that it is found in the Christian story of the Exodus. And so in the book of Exodus, you will see, in the Christian Bible, you will see that the Israelites were oppressed by Pharaoh, and they were made to be slaves, right? And that sounded very familiar to the story of African Americans in the U.S. and abroad in the diaspora as well. And so what Dr. Cone said is that we can mirror the story that God was with the Israelites and freed them, and you can give that story of hope and liberation to people today, that God will free those in bondage and suffering and oppression, and that God is still with the oppressed even today. Okay, so let's look at womanist ethics. We talked about different ways to study religion, and remember the womanist style, and theologian Reverend Katie Cannon, she's passed away, but I want to say she passed away earlier this year, but she called for the right or moral thing to do in terms of ethics. She called for the recognition of black women's contributions to the church, focusing on Christian church here, and to academia. Womanist ethics, what they consider right or moral, also says that things should be non-racist or non-heterosexist world, and it also fights for the justice of all people. So in womanist ethics, they are very concerned with fighting for people of all different generations, people of who love same sex or love different sex. They are going to fight for the justice of everyone. Everyone. All right. When we talk about moral ethics, we want to look at three different religions here. So we're going to look at Islam, Christianity, and then on the next slide we'll look at Hinduism. So let's look at what is moral or what is considered right in Islam. So there are 5 pillars which a Muslim will follow in this religion. So there are 5 pillars. Make sure you make note. Shahada, and that is the profession of faith in God, in Allah, and that Muhammad is Allah's prophet. Okay? Salat, prayer 5 times a day. And so each day there are specific prayers to be prayed, positioning of the body towards Mecca, and that is centering oneself and making sure that one is focused on Allah. Zakat is another pillar where they are encouraged to give their resources to the poor, taking care of community. Psalm, and please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing anything. This is fasting as a spiritual discipline. It takes a lot to discipline oneself and to say, I'm not going to eat something, or I'm not going to partake of something that the body really likes. I love food, and it can be very difficult to tell yourself not to eat something, but that is a spiritual discipline to humble oneself. And the last pillar is a Hajj, a pilgrimage to Mecca, a regeneration, kind of like a rebirth, kind of centering yourself on your call to Islam. All right, and now each pillar, the 5 pillars, are a framework of morals, what is to be done. And as you continue to read in your book, there are more, I don't want to say rules, but expectations in Islam in terms of how to raise family, what is considered to be a holy marriage, and those type of things. And that is expected to be followed. So in Christianity, let's look at Christianity. There are certain things that are similar, certain things that might be a little bit different, but there are a lot of similarities here. Christians are to follow the teachings and the lifestyle of Jesus Christ. Okay? And they follow what is outlined in the Old and New Testament of the Bible. Most importantly, the key things they will follow are the 10 Commandments. But remember, in the Bible, the 10 Commandments are not the only commandments or principles for Christians to follow. There are really hundreds and hundreds. I don't want to give a number because I'm going to say the wrong one, but I believe it's over 600. There are over 600 principles for individuals to follow, in addition to the 10 Commandments. Okay, so it's how to love others, loving your neighbor, loving your community, um, uh, going to church and participating at the temple or at your church. All of those things are for Christians to follow. Christians are expected to participate in their community, to advocate for social change, to change things within our local community. It doesn't mean you have to run for something, but it means that you want better for the people around you. To take care of the poor, the widows and the orphans, it may say, but those people who don't have as much as they would like to have. To be advocates for the children, people that can't speak up for themselves. Okay? We're also called to take care of the environment. I didn't add that on there as well. Christianity also calls its followers to obey the law of the land. You know, don't go around stealing and killing people. You know, we're supposed to follow the rules that have been set for us. Similar to Islam, Christians are called to give of their tithes, 10% of their earnings, and to give an offering to where they may belong at a church. Not just to give it to be nice, but remember, churches are businesses and they need money, so something has to help the church to run, and then that church is then responsible for giving to community and taking care of those in the community that it finds itself. Okay, and then lastly, let's talk about Hindu moral teachings. Now, this is very important. Unlike Christianity and Islam, they have a main book. So Islam's main book is the Quran, and Christianity's main book is the Holy Bible. And the Hindus do not have one particular central book. And so the Hindu believes in something called dharma, and these are things that are going to lead to something that is good, a good order in the world, social welfare. It leads to what is good or moral and healthy. All right, and I want you to also understand, that in Hindu, which finds its origin in a culture that is very stratified, India. And when we say stratified, it adheres to a caste system. Okay, so social classes play a big part in Hinduism. Okay, so the Hindu person has to fulfill something called dharma in their life in order to lead them to liberation, and that's moksha. Now remember, also in Hinduism, something called karma. You heard that word? Karma is always present in their life. And so this is the belief that where they find themselves today, they might be rich or something, right? And they say, well, that's karma. That is the result of something that you did in a past life that gave you good reward today. And what you do today is going to determine what's going to happen tomorrow. Okay? That's karma. And in Hindu ethics, I want you to also to remember that because of the caste system in India, a lot of you have to look at their situations very individualistic. So if you see someone on the street, it may not be because they made a bad decision or something. You always want to look at their situation or their social situation. So perhaps they are believing in Hinduism that that was the result of karma. Maybe something was done in a previous life to bring them to this homeless situation that they find themselves in. Okay. Okay, so I want you to make sure that you read up on chapter 7 and make sure that you prepare yourself. And I hope that you all are enjoying and reading and learning more about different religions. Take care, everybody, and please stay safe.